Professor Day, Professor Ghoshal, of course, the man behind the entire initiative, my friend Anirban Ganguly, Dr. Vijay Chauthaiwale, other members of the diplomatic corps, excellencies, diplomats, academics, and friends. It's really a privilege and also a pleasure to be here virtually joining this seminar on Ganga Mekong cooperation, and especially when we are completing 2 decades after we signed or rather entered into this agreement understanding in year 2000. I may also bring it to the notice of the participants that this year, in a way, is a very special year because some 15 days after, we will be celebrating the 100th death anniversary of Lokmanya Tilak, a freedom fighter, or rather the father of Indian Renaissance, who was imprisoned and kept for 6 long years in Mandalay in Myanmar, where he wrote Gita Rahasya. And therefore, this year for all of us is a very special year. And since Tilak was there in Mandalay, I believe that makes this discussion more relevant today. At the same time, Myanmar also has a connection. Maybe many of you are aware that when the Britishers imprisoned former royal rulers in Myanmar, which was known as Burma at that point of time, they were kept in Ratnagiri, which is a place in Maharashtra, which is also associated with the life of Lokmanya Tilak. I also recall an anecdote which I had come across when I was a student, and we happened to visit West Bengal as a school excursion kind of. And I was told, it must be an anecdote, I don't know whether there is any historical evidence to that, that sometime during the freedom struggle, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose's elder brother was approached by one of our northern neighbors, suggesting that India, after getting freed from the colonial rule, should join that particular country instead of becoming a free nation. And the response, as the anecdote tells us, by the elder brother of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose was that we all have a civilizational connection with which has been in a way strengthened by the Ganga and Yamuna, and therefore we cannot think of anything else. That was the answer given by Netaji's elder brother. I mean, that is what the anecdote says. I don't know whether it is historically correct or not. The point I'm trying to make is that the entire eastern part of the world, in a way, although we are discussing things about Mekong countries, but and India have historic relationship, cultural relationship. It also has everything to do with our ethos, with our spirituality, with our traditions. And therefore, these bonds are perhaps stronger than India's relations with any other group of countries. And just let me also emphasize here that it is very, very required that we discuss and review the Ganga Mekong cooperation. Because normally it so happens, and there are enough evidences to suggest that East is always overlooked by the West. I mean, you take the example of the world, or maybe the continent like Asia, or maybe countries like India, or provinces like, say, for example, since I come from Maharashtra, or cities like, say, Delhi or Mumbai. In all these regions, the eastern parts are comparatively neglected as compared to the western parts. Western Delhi is rich, not the eastern Delhi. Western Mumbai is rich, not the eastern Mumbai. Western Maharashtra is very progressive, very developed, not the Eastern Maharashtra. Western India knows for all kind of development, prosperity. They are the manufacturing states, as what they call, whether it is Gujarat or Maharashtra or Karnataka. But this cannot be said about the Eastern India. And therefore, I don't know why, but somehow Eastern parts continue to get a raw deal. That is the impression. And therefore, I believe that it is very pertinent to look after our Eastern friends. And in that context also, I attach great significance to this review of the Ganga Mekong cooperation. Having said that, let me also reflect upon as to what exactly is the difference between the previously known Act East policy and the Look East policy, which was in a way unveiled in 2014. While Act East policy focused on covering wider areas than just ASEAN, right at the beginning of the Act East policy, it was very clear. And it now fits with the change of narrative from East Asia to Indo-Pacific also. All those students of world affairs, I'm sure, are conscious of this. It lays greater emphasis on defense and security cooperation with the nations of the East than any time before, without compromising on the classic triad of commerce, culture, and connectivity, that is socio-economic and cultural cooperation, which in a way is the mainstay of the Ganga-Mekong cooperation. The policy's stronger focus, as I understand, on the role of the Northeast region, which is also very, very remarkable in building relations with ASEAN. Maybe some of us are aware that it was very recently, after 2014, that direct international flights were started between Guwahati and Bangkok. And therefore, especially in the CLMV component, this is acknowledged widely as well. In this context, questions such as place of Bangladesh in Act East policy, the understandable tendency to view Myanmar both as an immediate neighbor and as a Southeast Asian nation, and the enhanced investment in the Bay of Bengal initiative for multi-sectoral technological and economic cooperation, which is popularly known as BIMSTEC as a platform. I think these are the things of common knowledge. I need not very elaborately emphasize on them. The replacement of the word look by act sent out a very important signal at the higher level, the emphasis is on implementation, not just on adopting a particular policy perspective, but basically working on that, implementing, translating it into reality. And therefore, I think that Act East policy certainly opens a new chapter insofar as India's relations with all our Eastern countries, Eastern neighbors are concerned. As I understand, as a student of international relations, that there are three components of this Act East policy, or in a way, the Ganga-Mekong cooperation. And I believe all the three require some kind of a periodic review, which I'm sure diplomats must be undertaking from time to time. The first one is, of course, culture. Then, of course, there are other components like, for example, tourism, education, and everybody knows about it. But what I would like to emphasize here, since we are reviewing the Ganga-Mekong cooperation after 2 decades, that we need to add certain new dimensions to this Ganga-Mekong cooperation as well. But let me, before I reflect on that, bring it to the notice that the cultural and civilizational linkages between India and the Mekong countries are certainly very, very critical, and in a way, they provide us the foundation for further cooperation. Both the Ganga and Mekong, as all of us understand, are civilizational rivers. And the Ganga-Mekong Cooperation Initiative aims to facilitate closer contacts among the people inhabiting across 2 major river basins. Probably no other country had such strong links with the Mekong sub-region as much as India by way of religion, language, culture, and importantly, civilization. People in Southeast Asia seem to enjoy the treasure of feelings of this closeness, this proximity, because of the sharing. As I said, we share the ethos as well. The cultural influence flowed both ways. And Southeast Asia has also contributed, and I must emphasize here, in enriching India's shared geographical, India's culture and traditions. On the one hand, Mekong countries and India inhabit a shared geographical and cultural space, while on the other, each country retains its distinctiveness and unique identity. In it, it is this celebration of unity and diversity which underlines the Ganga Mekong cooperation. As all of us understand, Ramayana and Mahabharata as well, two great epics originated in India, had their influence in the entire Mekong region, if I may say so, and not just Mekong region, but other regions in the Southeast Asia as well. And I'm happy to share here that immediately after the Ganga Mekong cooperation was taken to a different level with the Act East policy adopted by the government under the able leadership of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Immediately thereafter, the Indian Council for Cultural Relations took upon itself to organize Ramayana festivals every year. And since 2015 till this date, every year, dozens of troops from all the ASEAN countries, majorly, are coming here. Of course, Mekong countries are a part of that and presenting Ramayana related dance performances. And they have become extremely popular. In fact, last year we took them to other places also, including, of course, Ayodhya, where they had a grand performance right at the birthplace of Lord Rama. And therefore, Ramayana and Mahabharata, both the epics, provide us a very, very important kind of bridge between both the countries, and the popularity and the influence of these epics, I believe, has no geographical limitations as such. And therefore, with this kind of a setting, which has been there for the mutual cooperation between the Mekong countries, I believe sky is the only limit. And therefore, I would suggest that apart from the often discussed issues like about cultural cooperation, cooperation in tourism, cooperation in education, and all those features, including, as I said, public health and traditional medicine, agriculture, water resources, management, I believe there are certain areas which require additional emphasis. And I am just bringing these areas to your notice for your consideration before I conclude. Let me, before elaborating on those areas, emphasize here that when the traditional
system
when basically for these particular multi-country agreements or platforms for cooperation, the foundation is in culture. Simply, we cannot depend upon government machinery. And therefore, I believe what is required here is we need to strengthen what is known in the diplomatic parlance as track 2 diplomacy. I would say that in a situation like this, the Ganga Mekong countries need to evolve a mechanism in a way to replace the so-called track 2 by the track 1. Because simply by signing papers in the government corridors and exchanging documents and then making some proclamations and announcements, we are not going to move further. It will have to be from people to people angle on those platforms. Unless and until we encourage these kinds of initiatives coming from the people, handled by the people, managed by the people, I think there always will be limitations. And therefore, this particular aspect I would like to emphasize here. And therefore, once we decide on that, can we at the same time also touch upon areas like what I described as development diplomacy? Because development issues or challenges insofar as economic development or human development in the larger context are concerned, perhaps are very common. The challenges that we face in India and the challenges that are being faced by Mekong countries, there are huge number of similarities. And therefore, if we identify those areas where we can really convert this development diplomacy into some kind of a regular mechanism of exchange of, as there was a reference, exchange of technologies as well. For example, in most of these countries, there are relics of the ancient times. And we know what kind of historical value do they have, whether there are temples or all other things which are maybe millennia old. And there comes the importance of the science of conservation of these historical monuments. And recently, I'm aware that government of India engaged in with several countries through a kind of an to extend the technology, manpower, know-how insofar as conservation of archaeological sites or these historical monuments are concerned. So these are the new areas, I think, wherein we can definitely move further. I am, before I conclude, pointing out only 3-4 areas which I believe are critical. Number one is language training. For example, in India, in several universities, we have departments of French, departments of, Mandarin, or departments of Japanese, and several other languages we teach. But I don't find there is any department of Bhasa Indonesia, for example. So this is required. And therefore, we need to bring language also in the in our consideration, so that there are departments of Asian or Mekong country related languages being taught here, and also Indian languages taught in those countries. So language plays an important role, and therefore this is something very, very required. So that is area number one, which is about knowledge. At the same time, when it comes to culture, already many things are happening, but there are new vistas which we need to definitely touch upon. And there was a reference in Mr. Goshal's address before to have or explore the possibility of exchanging technologies related to textile for it. I'm happy to make a mention over here that the Indian Council for Cultural Relations has decided to commemorate Mahatma Gandhi in this year of 150th birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi through organizing an assembly of Asian artisans, especially those who are working in the sectors of textile and pottery in Varanasi sometime in the month of October. Of course, these COVID-19 related issues are there. If we are not able to do it in October, sometime thereafter, but before the end of this financial year, we will have at least 100 artisans coming from Asian countries, and their focus will be, of course, Southeast Asia, and sharing their knowledge, their technologies, and also explore the areas where we can hold each other's hand, also tap new markets, and also understand the rich artistic traditions from India, as well as the countries which are known as Mekong countries. So this is something very, very critical. And I believe culture is not just about music and dance, and all other aspects of culture also require to be brought with greater emphasis on our agenda. So this is the second area. And the third, of course, is governance. Because in governance sector also, most of these countries are facing similar challenges. And therefore, there are mechanisms. For example, during the last 6 years, the government of India has ensured what is known as last mile delivery. I would say these kinds of mechanisms which the government has thoughtfully cultivated, whether it is welfare programs or any other programs through direct benefit transfer mechanisms, I think all these definitely contribute to the process of knowledge creation in the areas of governance. I'm sure similar efforts are happening in Mekong countries also, and we need to learn from each other's experiences. And that is how we can definitely add great value to the governance mechanisms in these countries as well. So with these three new areas, wherein insofar as language is concerned, I would emphasize on languages, insofar as knowledge is concerned, I will emphasize on languages and other technologies. Culture, of course, different aspects of culture apart from music and dance, and governance, where we can contribute to the development governance of the countries who are participants of this Ganga Mekong cooperation. I'm sure, as I said, sky is the limit. Many more areas also could be discussed, but these are the three principal areas which I think are required to be given some priority. Once again, I thank the organizers for allowing me to share my